In cybersecurity, words aren't just words, they're weapons. If you can't actually define the battlefield, you've pretty much already lost. So to build a real defense, you first need to understand the language of risk. And that is exactly what we're going to break down right now. This piece of wisdom, it's over 2,000 years old, from Sun Tzu. But you know what? It's the perfect blueprint for today's digital battlefield. Protecting our data, our systems, it all comes down to this exact philosophy: know yourself and know the enemy. The entire philosophy of information security, or InfoSec as you'll hear it called, is really built on these two core principles. Knowing yourself, well, that's all about understanding your own systems, your assets, and maybe most importantly, your weaknesses. And knowing the enemy, that's about getting a handle on the threats you face. So, to truly know the enemy, we have to start by speaking their language. The world of cyber risk has its own very specific vocabulary, and if you get a single word wrong, it can lead to a really bad miscalculation. These terms define how we see, how we measure, and ultimately how we defend against digital threats. Okay, let's start with the word threat. A threat is just the pure potential for something bad to happen. Think of it like a storm cloud on the horizon. The storm itself, with its potential for lightning, that's the threat. It just exists, whether or not it ever actually hits your house. Now, here's where that threat starts to get dangerous. A vulnerability is a weakness that a threat can actually target. So if that thunderstorm is our threat, then a building without a lightning rod is vulnerable. See? It's an unprotected weakness, basically a target just waiting for that strike. So you've got a threat and you've got a vulnerability. The exploit is the thing that connects them. It's the specific technique, the tool, that takes advantage of that weakness. In our little analogy, the lightning bolt actually striking the unprotected building, yep, that's the exploit. It's that moment potential harm becomes very, very real. And this brings us to a really critical distinction we have to make: the difference between a threat and an attack. A threat is that constant potential for harm. An attack is the action. The idea that a hacker could steal your data, that's a threat. A hacker right now, actively trying to break into your server, that's an attack. Big difference. All right, so now we have the vocabulary down. Let's put it all together. We can actually map out the entire anatomy of an attack, and you'll see how these concepts link together in a kind of chain reaction that goes from a simple threat all the way to a loss. This is the key question, isn't it? How does some potential danger out there turn into a real, tangible loss for you or your company? It doesn't happen by chance. It happens in a pretty clear and logical sequence. And here is that sequence in action. It all starts with what we call a threat agent. That's the person or group behind the threat, like a hacker. They identify a threat, say stealing your customer data. Then they use an exploit, like a cleverly worded phishing email, to target a vulnerability, which could be an untrained employee. The very act of sending that email is the attack. And if that employee clicks the link, well, it leads to the final stage. And that final stage is loss. This is the concrete negative outcome. We're talking stolen data, financial damage, a ruined reputation. From the attacker's point of view, this is mission accomplished. This is the end of the line. So, that's the breakdown of a single attack. But now, I want you to zoom way out with me so we can see the true scale of this battlefield. Because the modern digital threat landscape is, well, it's staggering. There are over 4 billion people online. Think about that for a second. The moment you connect a single system to the internet, you're exposed to billions of potential threat agents. This vocabulary we're talking about, it isn't just academic, it's absolutely essential for survival on this global battlefield. So what does all of this mean for you? Where do you go from here? We didn't just learn a few definitions today. We actually built a framework, a whole new way of seeing and thinking about your own digital security. If there's one thing you take away from this, let it be this: you cannot defend against something you can't even define. Understanding the difference between a threat, a vulnerability, and an attack is what lets you see the battlefield clearly. This language is the absolute foundation of any intelligent defense. And that brings us right back where we started, full circle, back to Sun Tzu. We've spent this time learning how to know the enemy by decoding their language and their methods. So the question I'll leave you with is this: what's your next move for knowing yourself? Where are your vulnerabilities? And really, how strong are your defenses?